What's up, plant lovers? I'm Devin Wallien, and in today's video I want to be talking about the great ground cover that is Lysimachia nummularia variety Aurea, or the creeping Jenny. Now, this is specifically about the Aurea, which is this more golden yellow variety, as opposed to the straight species, which tends to be a little bit overly aggressive. Now, I have been planting this in lots of different areas over my garden over the last 2 years, and in this video I'm going to show you guys exactly what they look like in a lot of different garden settings and why I love them and what I don't necessarily love about them. Now, Lysimachia nummularia is native to Europe. It produces this beautiful evergreen mat forming ground cover. It gets about maximum 3, maybe 4 or 5 inches tall in certain settings, but it has a really nice dense coverage with each plant material. Perhaps you're starting with a typical 3-inch plant. That 3-inch plant can easily spread 12 inches on its own, and you can then go forth and divide it. And this plant I've been trialing in my garden in many different settings, in particular dry shade, moist shade, dry sun, moist sun, and it really tends to do well in all of those conditions. Now, I'm growing here in Westchester, Pennsylvania, zone 6B, 7A, according to the new USDA zones. And it really is a wonderful ground cover for troubled, problematic areas. Like you can see here, I have this disgusting gravelly area that was just so overridden with weeds. I thought, all right, I'm gonna test out growing the creeping Jenny here, see how it does, and it's actually doing really well. I don't give this any supplemental watering, and it is starting to really outcompete some of those weeds, which is phenomenal. And I'm sure in maybe another 1 or 2 years, this whole area will be totally covered. I'm still getting weeds that grow in between them, so this area is so gravelly and dry, it's impossible to get those weeds out. So I honestly just come with a string trimmer and try to like clean out the areas in between the plants. And if I accidentally cut into the creeping Jenny, it doesn't matter. It grows back super quickly. So in dry, shady areas with gravel, poor soils, it does quite well. I've also found that it does really well in my clay soil. So you clay gardeners, I know there's a lot of you out there, this is a good choice. Now, another setting where it does tend to do quite well are in rock gardens, not so much different from this section I was just showing you. These plants are winter hardy, zones 3 to 9, and the thing about them that is good and bad is that they will root along those nodes as they creep and crawl. So that can be great for areas like this that you want to cover some of these sections out. But if you give them too favorable of a condition, they can definitely get a little bit too intense. So that is definitely something that you want to be aware of. Here I have them growing with some heucheras and epimediums in sort of this rock gardening area, and they're doing pretty well, slowly establishing themselves. I don't do anything, it's a little bit messy over here, but that's exactly perfect for these plants. So back in this section of my garden, this is my zero maintenance garden where I just plant things and let Mother Nature do their thing. I don't do any weeding back here, so I need to plant things like shrubs and ground covers that can persist on their own. So I am definitely growing more of the creeping Jenny out here, and I planted it. I never, maybe I watered it in. I planted them in the fall, last fall. I'm here in the middle of May, and they've grown tremendously over the past like 8-9 months. And I don't do anything for them. They just do their thing. The deer don't bother them. I'm having a lot of slugs eating a lot of my foliage on other plants. They're not touching the creeping Jenny, and I really do appreciate how it does bring these pops of yellow wherever I have them planted. It's a nice contrast with all of the green foliage shrubs that I am establishing here, like my oak leaf hydrangeas, lilacs, buddleias, things like that. So right here I have a dwarf crepe myrtle shrub, and I planted the creeping Jenny, I planted it like here and there, 3 little plants, and over the course of a season, they're filling this area out. So this is gonna be a wonderful like living mulch to have at the base of my crepe myrtle. And I think that's another really great way to use them as just sort of this bottom dressing to plant around shrubs. It looks really nice. And because they are, I wouldn't call them like totally drought tolerant, but they can definitely subsist in drier conditions. That makes them a great choice to plant in areas that are maybe have a lot of other roots growing maybe at the base of trees. If they don't only have like a thin, shallow layer of soil, it's gonna be a-okay for the creeping Jenny to still get established. Now underneath this dogwood, my water kind of flows this way, and this area right here tends to get really mucky and wet. And so I planted this here as sort of like a sponge to try to sop up some of that excess moisture so that my iris wouldn't get rotted out. And it's done beautifully. It really has taken that moisture and really sopped it up, and it keeps this area a little bit drier than it otherwise would have been. So it definitely does well in the dry shade we saw earlier, those rocky areas, but in the moist shade, it does fantastic as well. This is probably my favorite area that I have it planted, and you can see back in the backside, it's also just, those are a little bit newer plants I just planted about a month ago, so I should have a nice little sea of our creeping Jenny here in the coming seasons. But the one thing that you do want to make sure is that they will start to unify, and they will create a large sea of that yellow. So definitely you want to have some other matrixy sort of planting schemes with some other ground covers, maybe some short grasses or sedges to bring a little bit more interest, because it can get a little bit boring if you just have this sea of yellow without any sort of contrasting textures or colors. So definitely keep that in mind. And I'll show you one way that I've done sort of that matrixy look over here. But before I show you that, I do want to show you this section. Now this gets a lot more sunlight and good moisture, and you can see how dense it is growing. So if you give it a lot of sunlight and moisture, it will take off, and that can definitely be problematic because they will get pretty rampant. So definitely beware. But as you can see, I'm growing it with some Veronica with some nice purple flowers that are starting. I have just planted some catmint in here, so that should also give some added texture and colors to the mix. And also you can notice when it gets more sunlight, the yellow is more pronounced. When it's in more shade, it's a little bit duller, a little bit more green. In the bright hot sun, it definitely brings out that yellow. So, and the last section that I have it growing is over here with my hardy geraniums. Now, my hardy geraniums, you can see they're getting a little bit long in the tooth. If you grow hardy geraniums, you know that by like beginning of summer, they really need a shear back. So every year I'd have the hardy geraniums and I'd cut them back, and then I'd have these big blank sections in my garden, and it really bothered me. So last autumn, I planted some of this creeping Jenny in between the hardy geraniums with the thought that, all right, when I shear back my geraniums, the creeping Jenny will be there to take over the place. And it's really performed beyond my expectations, because yes, when I do shear it back, the creeping Jenny looks beautiful, but at the same time, with these beautiful hardy geranium flowers, underneath this kind of fluffy, airy foliage of the hardy geranium, I can still see the yellow creeping Jenny. And so it adds a really beautiful air, a really nice added interest, a layered effect. Consider something like this, that you can get that interest planting scheme when you combine correct plants. And I also have some dense growing dianthus in here somewhere, so that when I am ready to shear this back, I'll have the opportunity for that dianthus to grow alongside the creeping Jenny as well. Now, I don't have any containers planted with it, but it is definitely a classic spiller in containers if you are looking for a nice spiller for a spiller, thriller, and filler look in a container. But overall, now you have some great ideas how to use creeping Jenny in the garden. It is an awesome evergreen, winter hardy, deer resistant, sunny, shady ground cover that can really do a good job at inhibiting the weeds. But do be careful where you plant it. It could get a little bit overly aggressive. It really depends on where you site it in your garden. But definitely it is worthy of its Royal Horticultural Society Award of Garden Merit designation that it got a number of years ago. So if you are looking for a great ground cover, definitely consider the Lysimachia nummularia Aurea. And if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to our channel. We have new plant related content every single week. Thanks for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I'll catch you guys soon. Ciao.